In today's program, we're going to talk about the 11 big no-nos. These no-nos are designed for any leadership position. It's the ones that I've seen create failures, letdowns, lack of performance, people sometimes even losing their jobs. But certainly, if you can avoid these 11 big ones, you're going to be a much more effective leader, especially in the game of sales. So without further ado, let's get into it. Big no number one is avoid at all cost our friend hypocrisy. This is a big one. You must role model the expected behavior. Leading by example is crucial. And to build strong sales teams, you must do this every day, all day. Keep that documentary film crew on your mind, knowing that everybody's watching you and judging you, and you're going to lead them to whichever direction you want them to. You want to give them the great direction. Like holding your team to standards or expectations that you don't follow yourself, that's going to be perceived as very inauthentic. And it will lead to your employees' lack of respect or engagement. So, yeah, Vaughn, that makes all the sense in the world. Of course I do. But hold on, do you? Sometimes we get caught up in our own minds that we're doing the right thing, justifications. We forget to go look in the mirror. I want you to really ask yourself, am I really leading by the example I want to? Am I really setting the right role model that I want my folks to follow? Because it is so detrimental. It leads to a lack of motivation, certainly engagement. And sometimes it even creates resentment from your team when you're not holding yourself to the same level of standards that you're holding them to. Do as I say, not as I do. It's important to remember that a sales team is only as strong as you, the leader. And the leader needs to be very genuine. Sales managers should always lead by example for optimal team performance. Your team members, your sales team, your employee teams are your greatest asset, but only if you treat them that way, only if you keep them engaged and motivated, which is what all this is about. Leading by example so that you're willing to do what your team asks and invest your time to help everyone reach their goal. You're asking them to do things. If they ask you to do things, you need to lead by example. You need to follow through with it. That's one that sometimes people get a lot tripped up on. But by this give and take, this giving and receiving, this creates this great rapport and gives you a better understanding of what your team deals with on a daily basis and what their needs are. This two-way communication. That's a great way to watermark yourself. How much are you telling versus receiving? Should be about 60-40, but you got to make sure that you're receiving almost as much as you're putting out there in the way of communication demands and expectations. Because your failure to lead by example has this cascading effect that can positively impact your team in many ways. Effective sales teams require a leader who embodies the same values and implements the actionable steps towards achieving the goal that's been set. And we want you to model that behavior. So you're encouraging them to do the same. We're encouraging you to collaborate, have an open door policy that is actually open, other than physically open, that is open and people can come in and talk to you, ask you questions, think through situations, ask for your help, maybe even complain. And yes, you want them complaining to you. You want to know what their frustrations are so you can do something about it. And just remember, hypocrisy breaks down trust. and severely limits the potential for your sales team or your employees' growth. It limits their success. Whereas if you're really good at leading by example, you're walking the talk, that creates a high level of loyalty and very long-term success. So it's essential for sales managers to understand the perils of hypocrisy. 11 big no-nos. Number 2, overpromising and underdelivering. Making unrealistic promises or commitments that you either cannot or do not fulfill, that undermines and erodes the trust and authenticity again. As a sales manager, your primary role is to motivate your team, inspire your team, to get them to exceed revenue expectations, revenue goals, and drive business growth. And one of the biggest mistakes to cripple inspirationally is to overpromise and underdeliver. Don't make promises, commitments that you cannot fulfill. Now, it may seem like a harmless tactic, but it's like death from 1,000 cuts. There's no promise, there's no commitment too small for someone to notice, latch on to, create this mindset, this perception so that they're looking for it now. That's called confirmation bias. As soon as you fail to follow through with something you said you're going to do, they're going to cut the trust that they have in you by a little bit, but it keeps getting bigger and bigger over time. And especially as they talk with each other, it creates a lot of long-term damage. So even little things add up. So be very careful. Your reputation is enormously important to your success, your team's success. You're managing their mind. 90% of their success is going to come between their ears. And even setting unachievable goals, you got to be really careful about that. This is where you've got to go to bat and fight the boss sometimes. Because as soon as you put an unachievable goal out there, you've got to own it. And if it's impossible from the start, you've just taken the wind right out of them. You've deflated that balloon of emotion, positive emotion. So they're going to try less from the beginning when there is a goal that they see and you really know is pretty unachievable. Don't take the steps or the mistakes that break down this trust. So hold yourself to the mirror test. Are you even making small commitments that sometimes you don't follow through with? Catch those. And if you're making a lot of commitments you're not following through with because you're busy, I get it. You got a lot of things going on. You're being pulled in a lot of directions. You need to manage your time. You need to organize yourself to make sure that anything a team member has asked you to do is at the top end of the priority. Under-delivering and failing to meet their expectations allows them to have the attitude and the mindset that, why should I meet their expectations? They're not meeting my expectations. It's crucial to understand the ramifications of doing what you say you're going to do. Meeting targets, achieving deadlines, as you well know, in any industry is essential. But in sales, it can be the difference between staying afloat and sinking. Nobody gets paid until a sale gets made. You keep the lights on, my friends. And employees can be your biggest, greatest, most important asset, or they can be your biggest liability. And whichever side of the line they fall on is created by you. You are in 100% control of that. That's a tough one to swallow. They're a reflection of you and your leadership. Their success is your leadership success. And part of what drives that success is your ability to follow through with what you say you're going to do. So consistently, when they come through the door and they ask to have a problem solved, take action. and hold yourself accountable. If you've got a skill gap there, let's work on that. Put that at the top of your list. You don't ever want to skirt your responsibility, especially for those team members that are maybe coming up fairly short. Those are the ones that you need to get turned around. And if you're letting them down because you don't like them, they don't deserve your time or your effort. Bad attitude, my friends. They deserve your effort more than anybody else, because generally there's a skill gap, there's a mental block, a self-inflicting mindset that's creating the shortcomings in them. You've got to discover it, but you can contribute to it or you can improve it. So even these folks that you don't like a lot, you need to remind yourself, that's the ones that I really need to take care of, especially when it comes to training. I talk to hundreds of sales professionals each year in recruiting efforts, and it is such a small minority of sales professionals that ever had any professional sales training. So they've got a skills gap. What they're doing today is based on what they've been doing, maybe not what they've been taught. They've made it up. It's on the job training. It's trial and error, which is the worst form of training on the planet. So if you got skills gaps, you need to provide them with skills training. And if you've never had it, you need to get trained. Crack a book, take a course. You don't have to be the best salesperson. You just have to know the art and the process of selling better than anybody else so that you can help coach them to success. And if there are occasions that you can pitch in and help them out with these sales skills, hurrah for you. You just became a hero to them. Pitch in and help out, especially the underperformers. You want to show that you got their back. Help them achieve a goal. Help them learn from how you help them achieve that goal. But back to fulfilling your obligations, transparency and accountability are the key to all this, so that you are now winning the opportunity to ask them to do things. If they ask you to do things and you're not following through, they're not going to follow through with what you ask them. Trust begets trust. In order to be trusted, you have to grant trust. In order to be respected, you have to show respect. And this is one of those key fundamentals of showing respect. I can't warn you enough, has very far-reaching consequences, not only with the sales team, but with others in the organization too. Because you remember earlier when I said sometimes you have to go to battle for them, you want to make sure you're respected by the other departments too that support you. And doing what you say you're going to do is huge. You set the tone. Number 3, ignoring feedback. If someone brings some constructive feedback to you, that is so powerful. That's so valuable. And so often our egos block that feedback. We push back on that feedback. We take resentment. We take it personally, this feedback. And how do you do that? You pretend to listen, but you don't take any action on it. And that just shows that you're insincere. So authenticity again comes into the equation. Some managers tend to disregard constructive feedback, pretending to listen without taking action. That is very detrimental to your authenticity. Conversely, when you sincerely listen, you paraphrase it back to them, you appreciate and then take action on what they brought you. It took a lot of guts for them to come to you. Treat that as the valuable asset that it is. Because if you ignore that feedback, it not only affects the person offering it, you'll never get any again. But believe me, they're going to talk to the rest of the team, and it's going to affect the entire team's quality of work and loyalty to you, thus the company. So don't dismiss feedback. Take it for the asset, the valuable piece of information it is. You need to subordinate your ego, because your ego is going to be the first thing to fire off and defend itself. It's natural human nature. Catch it, bring it back, turn to listening, because you do not want to create a culture of mistrust. That just destroys team morale. So listening skills is something every great sales professional has. You were once a great sales professional. You know how to listen. It's now listening in a different realm. You must listen now in a way that's constructively helping you, which will help them. You want to address this feedback as showing appreciation, never defend it. Yeah, but avoid that at all costs. Because this creates, again, employee engagement. If you're asking them to improve and you're giving them constructive feedback, but you block it coming your way, are you leading by example? Of course not. But if you listen, you implement the feedback, you go ask the employees for, how am I doing? That's transparency. That's being vulnerable. That's being human. That's being real. You're not showing weakness. You want them to do the same for you, right? You want them to go practice the feedback, the constructive feedback that you've given them. You need to do the same. Number 4, playing favorites. Again, human nature, we have our favorites, and showing favoritism by consistently providing benefits or opportunities or recognition to select team members that you like more than others, that really damages your authenticity, and it creates this horrible perception of bias. As a leader, it's super important to foster a strong team dynamic where every team member feels valued, listened to, supported, recognized. And that has to be a very conscious effort on your part, because naturally you won't do it. Again, you've got your own confirmation bias. You're looking for the best people to give you reasons to compliment them. And you're also looking for your underperformers reason to give them constructive feedback. But you need to catch them in particular doing it, because that builds on further success. If they're doing it, you don't recognize it, you don't say anything about it, you're underperformers. You're undermining yourself. Again, they are only as good as you. That's what all this is about. Favoritism is a horrible virus that can creep into your leadership style, and you got to be aware that it's natural, and 2, become a lot more deliberate about making sure you're recognizing everyone equally, because it really damages your authenticity. And again, favoritism can be perceived as disingenuous or manipulative, which is highly detrimental to your leadership. And given additional days off or vacation days or perks in some way, new deals in some way to your favorites, and you create that perception of bias within your team, if they get wind that maybe you two are buddies or friends, that they're going to be looking for it. That documentary film crew is following you. And they're absolutely going to now, with their confirmation bias, be looking for, why am I not getting that same opportunity? Why I do that? Why isn't he recognizing me? Why isn't she recognizing me for that? And that is the virus that spreads through your team morale. If they feel like they're being overlooked or undervalued, that they're working hard and you don't give them credit for that hard work, it hinders growth And when you consistently provide across the board benefits, opportunities, recognition to just select team members, that unequal playing field, there's no group of employees I've ever worked with in all my years that fairness is more important to than a sales team. And if you're showing this favoritism or unfair advantages to anybody, even if it's just a perception, you need to be aware of it. Playing favorites as a sales manager is like sowing seeds of discontent and division within your team, where trust and camaraderie especially wither in the shadow of this bias, and it damages your reputation. So be real careful with it. Avoid showing favoritism. Go mirror check yourself on that. Number 5, lack of accountability. Failing to take responsibility for your mistakes or the team's mistakes, or even deflecting blame onto others. Again, natural. That's what our self-esteem wants to, when something goes wrong, look for somebody to blame it on. Great leaders take responsibility for it. Sometimes when they weren't directly responsible for it, but it was one of their people. It's one of their direct reports that was responsible for it. And truly, you are responsible. Authentic leaders acknowledge the errors, certainly that they make, and work to rectify them, but they take responsibility for the errors their team members make. They don't make excuses. And this accountability, owning your mistakes, is one of the most important traits a leader of any ilk can possess. You have to take ownership. And as soon as you make the mistake of deflecting blame onto others or failing to acknowledge mistakes, death by 1,000 cuts again. It undermines your authenticity, which leads to that lack of trust and respect from not only your direct reports, but the other supporting team members in other departments. And a lack of accountability can result in a breakdown of trust between departments, and especially even your boss. When things go wrong, own it. Even if you weren't directly responsible for it, own it. I got it. I'll take care of it. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. That's gotten me out of more trouble in my career than anything I've ever done. It just stops the lecture if your boss is chewing you out. I got it, boss. I'm going to fix it. And then I'd come up with, okay, how could I have prevented that? What was the root cause of that? What did I not do that allowed this to happen? It always comes back to you. Go look in the mirror. Because you do not want to allow this lack of accountability, ownership, to create a culture of negativity within your organization, within your team. And it'll spread further. Lack of accountability, especially as a sales manager, tarnishes your leadership like a ship without a rudder. You'll just be adrift in a sea of diminishing respect and trust from your team. The importance of being accountable cannot be overemphasized because it has a huge negative effect on the respect you get. Number 6, using buzzwords or jargon excessively. We all do it. Be aware of it. Overusing these buzzwords or corporate jargon without genuine understanding, and boy, you look like a fool if you use some of these buzzwords in the inappropriate place. It just makes you look very foolish. And you've fallen into a trap. Remember that documentary film crew? They're following you all day. And if somebody else knows what it means and you maybe only know partially what it means and you drop it in the wrong place, that's a scald. They're going to pick up on that. Then they're going to be looking for more of that in the future. Know what you know and accept what you don't know. Go find out. And if you're not 100% sure when the latest buzzword or jargon comes into your vernacular, better go look it up so that you can digest it and use it in the right places. And then you don't overuse it because that's just irritating. You don't want to irritate your team members, and you may not be aware you're doing it. But this is one of the ways I've seen multiple times that somebody just wears on their team members because you use the same word over and over and over again. Look in the mirror. So you don't want them distracted by this. You want to keep the focus on achieving results. Number 7, micromanaging. Excessive micromanagement signals a lack of trust, plain and simple. CRMs, one of the greatest tools ever invented in sales and one of the worst tools ever invented for sales management. I see CRMs, KPIs so abused. They're used instead of a guideline of data for us to analyze and understand what behaviors are driving that into a aluminum bat to beat people over the head with. If you're overseeing every detail and you take away autonomy and creativity, they've got to do it exactly your way. That is a recipe for disaster. You're undermining yourself. Your way may have worked really well. It probably did. You wouldn't be asking somebody else to do it, but that was your way. Every salesperson has a level of creativity, and they've got to do it as they feel comfortable doing it. So don't try to command and control your way into them doing it the only way that you know how, which is your way. And also micromanaging every little detail, too many check-ins, too many corrections, it leads to a lot of burnout, and they just dread seeing you come. Every time the phone rings and it's you, they get a little sick. They get overwhelmed by all this, and they certainly feel undervalued. You get that recipe, you're going to have turnover. And sometimes turnover is good. Often it's bad. We learn by our mistakes. You cannot be risk avoidant. You have to take some risk to be an effective sales manager. You have to sometimes let them learn their own lessons, as long as it's not going to shut down the company. But you want to show you trust their judgment. And there's no better lesson if they're about to make a mistake than them to learn it from their own mistake. You're still responsible for it, but let's talk about how we don't make that again. Mistakes are great. If we take them, dissect them, learn from them. Okay, this went wrong. Why did it go wrong? What am I going to do to prevent it in the future? You have an open discussion, two-way discussion, because very often when a mistake happens, this micromanagement kicks in. The sales manager wants to make sure they control this in the future. So they don't have a two-way conversation. They have a one-way conversation. And that's not going to solve the problem, because they're going to tune you out. They're going to have all their excuses going through their mind that is just pushing whatever you're saying to them back. So it's a wasted conversation, which leads to frustration on your part and more micromanagement. I would be real careful with that. Just avoid it at all costs. And be very approachable. That's the other key to all this. You need to be out there managing by walking around, being approachable. When somebody comes in the office, put a smile on your face, welcome them in. And take time to listen, truly listen. And if you can't do it right now, tell them, hey, listen, I really want to hear you, but I got to finish this up. Can I come get you in 15 minutes? So it's not a no, it's a not right now. Because if they've got something burning, it's a priority. That's their priority. It may not be your priority, but it's their priority. And remember, you're managing their inspiration. You're managing their motivation. And if you just blow it off, their opinions of you are going to reduce. And your opinion isn't the only opinion. You need to make sure, too, as you're talking about issues, that you hold your opinions loosely. I can't tell you how many times I was convinced I had the answer as to why something was going wrong. And I listened and I talked and I collaborated and I found out I was pretty far from the truth. But had I followed my instinct, I would have looked like a fool. So don't be a micromanager. Don't be the only person with an opinion or a thought or a way to do things. Collaborate with your team. Be open to their opinions. The more you listen to them, the more they'll listen to you. It's a two-way street. Number 8, ignoring employee well-being. Working harder is sometimes required, but working smarter is always the way to go. And if they're just doing more of the same thing that's not working, not good. You look foolish. And you're creating that stress, that frustration that's only going to erode their ability to be motivated and in the game the next day. In fact, I saw a study recently from the American Psychological Association where work-related stress costs the U.S. economy about $500 billion a year in reduced productivity and about $300 billion in absenteeism and turnover. It's a big number. It's this insidious villain that comes into our lives. We may be creating it because we're putting more and more pressure on people. Work harder, do the same thing, do more of it, even if it's not working. If you're in team, your employees, your sales team are overworked and stressed out, you're going to get burnout. You're going to get a lack of inspiration. It's just going to happen. You're going to, when you start getting more and more absenteeism, consider, am I putting too much pressure on my team? If I'm constantly replacing the same seats, my sales team isn't staying 2 or 3 years apiece with me, you're probably creating that turnover through this negative impact that comes from putting too much pressure and stress, burnout on them. You need to be loyal to them. You need to give them a break. And if what they're doing isn't working, figure out a way to help them work smarter, not harder. Problem solve with them, critical thinking skills. It's essential. Number 9. So many of you, not the majority of you, were promoted from sales into sales management. And you weren't the worst salesperson that got promoted. No, you were probably one of the best, if not the best salesperson who got promoted. I was the best. You just need to do what I did, and you'll be the best too. BS. Don't be that person. Acting like you have all the answers and not seeking input or admitting that you don't know something, now it's going to come across as inauthentic again. That's your ego speaking. You need to pull that ego back. A subordinate ego is very important to your success as a leader. Listen, ask questions. Seek other ways. Ask for their opinions. Don't fall into that trap of pretending you know everything. You've got all the solutions and you're just barking the direction to everybody. Go fix it. That erodes your respect. Don't set yourself up for that failure. Scaling businesses need to ensure that you have the right resources. Continually learn. We want you to learn everything you can, whether it's skills, more information on your industry, but especially when it comes to leadership. That's why you're going through this program. So be careful about being the smartest person in the room. You may be the smartest person in the room, but you're not smarter than the room. The collective knowledge of that room. And you're only a contributor to that knowledge, not the sole owner of that knowledge. Keep that in mind. Never once that I can remember have I thought I had the answer, that I didn't turn it into a collaborative discussion, that I didn't get viewpoints or issues that I just had not thought of or I was unaware of. So don't put yourself under that enormous pressure of being the smartest person. You may be, but the room is way smarter than you. You need to create a pool of collective knowledge. Leaders go last in their opinions. You ask questions, you get others' opinions first, and then you can add in where you feel like maybe some of the information is missing. You'll be shocked at how much they know, but you don't know they know. You'll never know until you ask a lot of questions and go last when you're trying to figure something out that requires your intelligence and your knowledge on something. That's being authentic. So don't pretend you know everything. The consequences are dire. And continue to work on your knowledge. Be a self-development leader. Number 10, manipulative behavior. Now, this is less common than the other 9 that I've talked about so far. But be careful and be aware that sometimes it can be perceived as manipulation or deceptive tactics, especially when you're trying to achieve some specific outcome. It can come across as unethical. Manipulative behavior is not only inauthentic in your approach to leadership, but it just creates false impressions. And you don't want to be perceived as cunning, artful, to try to manipulate people to get their goals or to make a sale. Super essential to be authentic. Be genuine, be transparent, be honest. Last but not least, number 11, failure to acknowledge team contributions. What does that mean? Not giving credit to your team for their achievements. They get all the recognition, you get all the blame. Sorry, that's what comes with being a leader. So make sure you never personally take credit for the team's success or even a person's success. Be humble. That is a huge contributor to morale. When your team is busted ass and you're receiving all the credit for it, and you're not giving the credit to your team members, oof, that's bad. That's bad juju. Has a very negative effect on their morale. And leaders who fail to give credit where it's due undermine their authority and authenticity. And it's so easy to spot. And it's icky to salespeople. Talk about that fairness thing again. Oh, they hate that ego. And they're just not going to follow you the way you need them to follow you. So make sure you're acknowledging your team's contributions. Even if you did have a lot to do with it, give the credit to the team. Wallow in your own success privately. Because if you're taking credit where the team has really contributed, they're not going to like you very much. And they need to like you. They need to respect you. They don't have to be your best friend. But that gives them that inspiration to fight more for you. They see you doing that. They appreciate that. They get all the credit. You take all the blame. And when you develop that style of leadership, man, you're going to have a huge impact of success on your team. So let's wrap this up. Sales team success isn't solely determined by product knowledge or even sales techniques. It's overwhelmingly driven by attitude that resides between their ears. 90% of your team success is right here. It's like an inflated balloon. Your job is to keep it at the proper PSI. That drives success. Knowing that every now and then you need to take a little out, you need to be making a lot of contributions, that emotional bank account. Always remember, people don't work for companies, they work for people. Their success is a direct reflection of you and your leadership. So keep the proper PSI in that balloon, be contributing to it on a daily basis, catch them doing it right, manage by walk around, being open to feedback and ideas and opinions. Recognizing that this isn't all about coddling. Every now and then you're going to have to let some air out of that balloon. But if you keep making enough deposits, you don't deflate the balloon. One of the huge missteps many sales managers make is constantly taking air out of that balloon. So they feel beaten up and downtrodden and I can't do anything right. Avoid that. You need to create equilibrium. That leads the team to success. And you're in 100% control of that. Be true to yourself. It's an age-old adage, but it's significant to sales leadership. Authenticity and clarity of identity are defining traits of great sales managers. That's inspiring to a sales team. Salespeople crave genuineness, honesty, transparency, vulnerability, authenticity. Because when a sales leader is authentic, they create the proper environment for success, trust, and respect. It's enormous how it boosts the output of your team members. So keep up the good work. Keep working on this.